I have Sean Frasick, Brian Edward, and Rob Moore. And we're here to talk about Mythicist Milwaukee. And first, well, why don't we just do a round robin and start with you, Sean, just a brief introduction and your role with Mythicist Milwaukee.
Sure. My name is Sean Frasick. I am the current president of the Mythicist Milwaukee team. And we are striving to educate the free thinkers, atheists, agnostics, whatever you want to call them, in Milwaukee and in and around Milwaukee about the mythological origins of religions, as well as bringing the Milwaukee community together and kind of erasing the black hole of secularism that is Milwaukee. So that's currently what we're working on.
Okay, excellent. And Brian?
My name is Brian Edward. I'm the finance director of Mythicist Milwaukee. Relatively recent atheist convert, but a big science fan my whole life. And I really feel like the word needs to get out. I'm a big history fan, and I've seen how superstition alone can create oppression, and I seek to really speak the truth, and that's about it.
Okay, excellent. Rob,
I'm the spokesman, event host, podcast host for Mythicist Milwaukee. I'm actually the president or co-director of a couple of other sister groups, if you will, in the Free Thought Alliance here. The Mythicists turned me onto their cause as soon as we met, and I became an instant convert, and in so much as they are, along with 4 or 5 of us, the movers and shakers in the local movement, I work closely with them to move the whole thing forward.
Okay, very, very cool. And you guys are doing a lot of great work. I'm going to ask some questions. I guess would be more focused with Sean, just for these questionings as president and co-founder. And you talked about this a little bit on your introduction, but these questions are: what is Mythicist Milwaukee? When was Mythicist Milwaukee founded? What's the mission statement? And a little bit on how Mythicist compares with the terminology atheist and agnostic for people that aren't familiar with that term.
Sure. Yeah. That's a whole lot there.
That is a whole lot there. I probably should have broken that up a little bit more, but
No worries. I can. I'll talk, and then let me know if I miss anything. And guys, jump in anytime, and feel free to interject at any time. But Mythicist Milwaukee is a lot of things. It started as just me and Antonio, the co-founders, just kind of meeting in coffee shops and researching the mythologies, the ancient mythologies, the Greek, Egyptian, Roman, as a result of seeing the video Zeitgeist. Now, I know Zeitgeist has this kind of negative air around it. People like to challenge the scholarship, but what it does is it actually, the film itself simplifies a lot of the mythological origins of religions and kind of offers it up to people in like a bite-sized chunk that people can, laymen such as ourselves can understand. So when Fritz and I actually saw this information, being the skeptics that we are, and always having to be right, we started researching our own, going and researching out on our own, and finding the same information as what a lot of Zeitgeist talks to, as far as how modern religions evolved from earlier mythological stories, and just kind of how people took these stories and changed it to what they needed, and then eventually used it and called it religion. And it's always been religion. It's just now the earlier mythologies are seen as myth as the new religion became popular, more and more popular. So that's where we started. We just meeting in coffee shops. We started on Facebook. We were just making goofy pictures, trying to offer up this information to the laymen, like Zeitgeist did to us. We were trying to simplify this information because when you get into it, it's very long-winded. You have to do a lot of research. You have to research some of the words even that you've come across. You have scholars such as D.M. Murdoch, Dr. Richard Carrier, Dr. Robert Price, David Fitzgerald. All these authors have been doing this for years and years and years, and we just kind of started diving into it. So our goal is to kind of get their information that they're sharing and just simplify it for the masses so people can read it, small chunks, share it. And then we traveled to Egypt, and just kind of to further our own research. We went to Egypt to kind of see, because essentially when you go back in history, Egypt is where all of this started. A lot of the stories that we have these days started. And so we decided, let's go to Egypt. Let's put our money where our mouth is, and let's really do this thing. We traveled out there. We did our own independent research in the pyramids and the different temples and sites that can be found there. And then we actually came back. While we were out there, we were introduced to the Muslim call to prayer, which really intrigued us. And we came back with this knowledge of this mandatory 5 times a day mandatory prayer that the Muslims practice. And it just seems so outlandish to us that any type of practice like that would take place in the U.S.
Hey, Fred.
Oh, hey, Fred.
Hey, guys.
Hey, we just got started. So Sean was just explaining how you guys kind of got started with Mythicist Milwaukee. And as far as the inspiration, you said it was Psych Guys?
Yeah, it was the Zeitgeist film.
Oh, okay.
Sean introduced it to me after a mutual friend of ours sent it to him, and as soon as he saw it, he said I had to watch it, and as soon as I saw it, it was immediate. It was the effect.
Okay, it's been a little while since I saw the film, but that talked about the three stars or the stars in the shape of a cross, or I remember it did make that direct tie to Christianity and how Jesus wasn't a person, but these other myths, and really of the positions of the stars and how the stars would leave the hemisphere, and relating that to like resurrection and death. But you guys could probably
the film ties in the astrological origins of all religions, and it did focus a lot on Jesus, and in a lot of mythicism you see a lot of people focusing on Jesus only because it's one of the most well-known figures of the modern day religion. So it showcases how that story can be seen as symbology in astrotheology or astrology or whatever you want to call it, and how it's how those stories that we know today started as people's observations of nature and people telling stories of nature, and how those stories have transitioned throughout the years into different characters such as Dionysus, Jesus, Horus, Osiris, all of these different characters. And that, again, why you see like a lot of these characters have the same mythical makeup, because these stories all have an origin, and that's what Zeitgeist kind of talks to.
Yeah, do you remember how they spelled that? It started with a Z, right?
The Zeitgeist, Zeitgeist.
Okay, I think I watched that on Netflix. But
I didn't hear the bell ding, so you're still good in the beat.
Okay.
That's German for a ghost of the time.
Oh, okay. Very cool.
Nice, well done.
Yeah, and Sean, you mentioned going to Egypt. I found Egyptology fascinating. I listened to this course from the Great Course series, History of Ancient Egypt by Bob Breyer. And it was so amazing, 3,000 years of well-preserved history. And it does seem to me that the Great Pyramids are a great reminder that all the gods are mortal. Because no one was more devout than the ancient Egyptians and their religious practices.
Yeah, I mean,
well, there are some indications that the way that the pyramids are aligned are actually meant to align to Orion's belt, which in ancient Egyptology, those were called the three kings, and then you see that parallel where three kings are there at the birth of Horus, which would be the parallel, as D.M. Murdoch would say to Jesus. That would be like the comparable figure. So those three kings would be the three kings, I guess, that followed Jesus. But I think it's great as well when we talk about the things like the pyramids as well, is to not take away from the ancients' ability to do, magnificent architecture. I think it just diminishes, what they did historically when we say, like aliens did these things,
No,
Yeah.
I'm sure you're familiar with them, and I'm trying to remember the name. He's got a Dusty Smith, the cult of Dusty.
Yeah.
He's got a video where he talks about that, and I think what the Egyptians did was very impressive, but it's really funny to hear the way he said it. Well, let me see. You got a bunch of blocks, and then you got a bunch of blocks on top of other blocks. So the way he puts it is kind of funny. And then he's showing somebody with a lever moving a giant block by himself, and he's like, well, if this guy can figure it out, I'm sure these people obviously figured out how to do it. And it reminds me of something that the historian James Lowen said as well, where there's this thought of a lot of people that ancient people were stupid. And
Right.
that's not true. A lot of ancient people were extremely intelligent.
Right. I mean, you just look at the Mayan calendar. I mean, technically speaking, wasn't the Mayan calendar pretty accurate up until about this year or last year when it supposedly had a restart?
Yep.
Well, it was also the Egyptians that played around with the human heart and the human brain, and they started dissecting animals, and to kind of put to bed the whole pyramid building thing. I mean, there's a lot of evidence out there that showcases what the diet of the people that were building the pyramids are based on the different burial grounds of where the animals are, the bones that they ate. But the other thing that people don't understand, too, is that when the pyramids were being built, this is like the government's project. This is like think of a day. This is where people went, the citizens of Egypt went to go work. This is what provided them with food and money. Like, they wanted...
It's their Hoover Dam.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
It was definitely the power of central government.
Right.
And the fact...
Exactly. You put it today, right, like Brian said, if you're going to build a Hoover Dam,
Yeah.
the government's going to pay you to come do it and feed you, you're going to do that. That's a job to you. So to say that it was built by slaves or built by aliens, and I mean, this is just nonsense. So...
Yeah.
Now, could they have used slaves, of course, being a devil's advocate, of course? Well, we do the same thing when we subcontract, inmates to do work, but the vast majority of the work wasn't done by slaves,
Yeah.
Like Sean says, it was definitely the society's job at that time.
Well, the
Do the
logistics,
hard stuff.
the organization, the skill that these people had, I mean, it really is a remarkable feat of management. But yeah, the myth about the slaves and tying this to Ramses the Great, which was over 1,000 years after, the story of Ramses the Great and Moses, over 1,000 years after the pyramids were being built, but still all these people having this idea on his head that the pyramids were built with the Jews that Moses led out of Egypt. It's
Right.
That's true. It's total anachronism. You're right. Good point.
Right, and so for us, like I said, that was like our thing. We wanted to go to Egypt to kind of see this firsthand. We experienced, like I said, the Muslim culture and the Muslim traditions, the 5 daily prayers, the 5 mandatory daily prayers, and all throughout Egypt, the adhan, or the Muslim call to prayer, was being played 5 times a day at all times of the day, 4 a.m., midnight. So when I brought this back to to the U.S., and we were thinking, this could never happen in the U.S. We found out it actually was happening in the U.S., in Hamtramck, Michigan, and Dearborn, Michigan, and they're still, based on my research, they're still the only two cities that are legally allowed to perform this practice of a public broadcast of the Muslim call of prayer. So that intrigued us to kind of go and check out that community and see how this practice has affected what is a very diverse, religiously, culturally, community. That's where we decided to create our Night Journey to Hamtramck documentary, and you can find that on YouTube. It's just the Night Journey to Hamtramck, and in there we explore the Muslim call of prayer, as well as how the town of Hamtramck has kind of been affected by it. We get a lot of people's kind of like on the street interviews, feedback as far as like, what if they know what it is, what it means. We also go in the video and we explain the mythical origins of that story as well, and we see how that story parallels an ancient Persian story out of the religion that's still practiced in Iran, the Zoroastrianism.
Now that story is more colloquially or commonly known as the Night Journey of Muhammad. But we had a little play on words and just called ours the Night Journey to Hamtramck due to the fact that we did it overnight and tried to get there in the morning before the first call to prayer at 6 a.m., which they didn't do, but we did end up getting video footage of it later in the day.
Yep, and I saw that.
Go ahead, Jim.
I saw that video on your website, and I was kind of surprised that a city ordinance would allow that, because I know where I am, if a neighbor's playing loud music after 10 p.m., you can call the police because there is an ordinance where people are allowed, certain times where they're able to sleep, and it just seems like for 5 a.m. for that to start up, I could just see annoying to a whole lot of people. And I was kind of surprised.
Interestingly enough, they used to allow that. That's how it initially had started. People complained, so they had to amend the quote-unquote noise ordinance, which is what it actually is.
Yeah.
Labeled under the noise ordinance. So it's just intriguing that, for this population, who have been practicing this for some time now, they would have to follow the rules of a noise ordinance. So for somebody to, call the prayer noise, whatever it is that they can use to practice their cultural heritage and beliefs, I guess, they'll do it. But, when it comes to noise ordinances, they had to follow it where they couldn't do it before 6 a.m. nor past 10 p.m.
Okay. Yeah, but I was kind of surprised with the people you were interviewing that liked the sound of it.
Right.
To me, it sounds horrible.
I think they just didn't know really what it was saying, and most of them were.
And what was really interesting though, when Fritz and I first met out, immediately we felt the religious tension that was there. We had, a little behind the scenes in the video itself. It looked as if everyone liked it and there's no problem. But when Fritz and I showed up, there were people that wouldn't talk to us. We had people, we were saying, we're shooting a documentary, you want to be on the camera? They said yes. As soon as they found out what it was about, they said, no, thank you, and they walked away. There was many stories. Jessica, the girl that's in the film, she actually handed us a secret note with her phone number on it and said, I want to be on this, but I can't let anybody know I'm going to be on this. So he really saw this divide. It was almost like the Muslims versus the Christians, and that's really what it was there. And so it was a very uncomfortable setting for Fritz and I. And you can tell kind of the people that were in the faith, really deep in the faith, really had a hard problem coexisting.
And the area, Hamtramck itself, isn't very large, but the zone in which the Muslim community live in is very, very dense, and it's in a very small. My best guess would be maybe 10-block area, and it's probably even smaller than a 10-block area, to be quite frank. So I personally, we give a lot of credit as well and valor to Jessica, who lives in that very small, tight-knit community, to express her views and express herself the way that she did in the video, especially knowing that the main reasons why we believe people didn't want to speak out with their opinions is due to some level of fear, and we can see that level of fear is very real for some people. All we got to do is look at the news today and what happened in Paris.
Yep.
When you speak out to a certain religion, in this case Islam, and fanaticism is very real. And today's a perfect example to have this conversation and say, well, 12 people died today in Paris due to expression of freedom of speech. So, I personally think that Jessica, as a woman as well, speaking her mind, just adds some more of her valor.
Yeah, and it's really unfortunate that people have to feel afraid as well. I mean, it's terrible. People aren't able to freely speak their mind, or at least feel like they can freely speak their mind. Okay.
Right,
So,
and that's, when your first question was, kind of what we are. Well, we're a lot of things. We are a group. We're a meetup group in Milwaukee. We are a research group. We've done a documentary. We're putting on an event in Milwaukee. But the basic thing that we want to get across is there's no, as far as bigotry goes, we're so sick and tired of the bigotry that exists. And one of the other stories out of Hamtramck, real quick, is the Florida pastor Jerry Jones actually came to Hamtramck and visited that town, was burning Qurans, and essentially started a riot. So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff, he was saying, if you don't have Jesus, you're going to hell, things like that, even though he doesn't understand that Jesus is in the Quran and in Islam, I should say. But again, it's just this bigotry that exists. That's what we stand against.
yeah, and I wrote an article not that long ago that said it was titled, "Pardon me, but your religion calls for me to be murdered and tortured forever." So, when you talk about that bigotry, it's like you want to be respectful and you want to be open-minded, but at the same time, when somebody claims to follow a religion that has passages that condone the murder and torturing forever, it can be kind of a hard thing to overlook and still be respected. I mean, that's what we do. What choice do we have? We're a minority in a mostly Christian country, but it's maybe we're being a little too thin-skinned about the whole murder and torture thing. Maybe we're just being a little too sensitive.
If you respect the American Constitution, which I think most theists claim to do, you would find that hell would certainly violate cruel and unusual punishment. Even by our own standards, that's evil.
Yep.
Right. Absolutely.
Yep.
And mythicist as a whole, mythicist really means the study of ancient mythologies and how they relate to modern religious beliefs. That could be at this time frame. That could be, 1,000 years ago. That could be how a Christian views Islam's figures as myths. They're a mythicist against Islam, or they're a mythicist against the Mormons, but it's the Christians that, So mysticism doesn't really carry theism or an atheism, but what we like to do, we like to see the mythicists. We've partnered with the secular group in Milwaukee, and that's how we met Rob Moore, and how he kind of came onto the team. And, when we met Rob, he really, we started working and collaborating on different projects, and now we have a podcast show that airs every Sunday at 7 o'clock. You can check that out on our website as well. But Rob is actually the host of the Mythicist Milwaukee show.
He's a co-host. He's co-host with Brian.
Correct. Co-host Brian and him are co-hosts. Brian, we met Rob first, and then we met Brian, I'd say like 6 months later, and we've all been kind of working together towards our secular project.
Right, but even before that, with Rob, we formed an alliance with him and other members of SWIFT to form FAM, which is the Free Thought Alliance of Milwaukee. And then through that, we also had another community event where we invited other local secular atheist groups, such as the Sunday Assembly, the Student Secular Alliance or Secular Student Alliance. The Secular Coalition of Wisconsin.
Yep.
American Humanists were there. Yeah, American, AHA, American Humanist Association was there as well. They're going to be back for this next event, and I think FFRF right now, Dan Barker has just indicated to you, Sean, that he's interested in participating in our event.
Yep.
Very cool. And when was Mythicist Milwaukee founded?
When was it? It was founded in January of 2013. It was actually the 31st of January is when we created the Facebook page, and I tend to think that was our first official start date when we first created that page, because that's how we started sharing information and trying to reach out to others, that were like-minded.
Okay. And I wanted to get into, and we, I guess, talked about it a little bit non-directly, but directly. How do you call yourself a mythicist? How does mythicist compare with the terminology atheist and agnostic for the people not familiar with that term?
I consider myself agnostic, but I'm a mythicist. Sean, you're atheist, but a mythicist. Brian? What are you, Brian?
I would call myself an atheist and a mythicist.
Yeah, the mythicist word it's one of those words that's starting to become bigger in the secular world, the secular movement. You'll hear it more now with presentations by David Fitzgerald, Dr. Richard Carrier, Dr. Robert Price. But like I said, it's a word that was taken out of the 1800s. It was just really someone who believed that the religious stories and traditions are myth and not historical. Now, like I said, so you can have somebody that's a fundamentalist Christian, but they're a mythicist to the Islam, to the Mormonisms, to the Yazidis, whatever. Mm-hmm. They're a mythicist in that regard. But so mythicist, it really is kind of like it's a viewpoint and it's a study. It's not really like, because I'm an atheist, we'll see kind of where this word starts to go in the secular world. I know Brian and I had a lot of interactions with people at the last Apostacon in 2014, and we're starting to hear that word being thrown around. So it'll be interesting to see what happens, if that becomes an identity on its own, or is it like a supplemental title along with what your core belief is? It's a great question.
Because I've heard
mythicists don't really, for at least the mythicists that we're aware of, don't really debate the existence of God and put that under the umbrella of mythicism. And understand as well that there could be some historical figures that within the Bible, some historical towns and times and traditions, but it doesn't mean being a mythicist doesn't mean that page 1 to page however many pages are in the Bible or the Quran, to say the 100% of it is mythical, but the vast majority of the events that seem supernatural, in fact, all the supernatural events, we would see as mythical. And, it's more than just really having an opinion. It's not really saying it's my opinion that Jesus is a mythical character. It's when you look at the whole scope of religion and cultural practices, and you start seeing how there are other gods that predate Jesus Christ's supposed existence, that also turns water to wine, like Dionysus, or dies and resurrects, birthday on the 25th, born of a virgin mother. And you start saying, well, why is it that all these gods have such similar characteristics, which is one of the wonderful things that the Zeitgeist did, sometimes a little crudely, but, it did a fabulous job of showing those parallels. And then once you start understanding that these have astrological connections and connections to, the changes in the seasons and the, different time periods and dates and alignments of the stars and the sun and the sky, you start seeing that in the end, the ancients were just nature worshipers, and they would create stories, such as the constellations. Orion isn't a real figure out in the space, so they created this hunter and called him Orion. So they would create fabulous stories, because that was really, for a lot of the ancients, much of their entertainment. So, these stories keep getting pushed down, passed down through the generations. They mix with other cultures and coalesce sometimes, and they share, and then, they form hybrid stories, and then you see other connections as well with Epic of Gilgamesh and that great flood, and then the Noah story, and then Moses and Minos and Nises and all these other Moses-type lawgiver characters that predate, that have similar characteristics. You start seeing, okay, when you go back, why is it that these characters they're all lawgivers, they went down in a reed basket, they were saved. It's just too many coincidences, and then once you start seeing where they're really connected to with nature, you start understanding, okay, this is why the hypothesis for Jesus not even being a real figure comes to being. It's not just, you're angry at Christianity, so you want to say Jesus isn't real. It's not like that.
Yep, right. And in the Cosmos series, Neil deGrasse Tyson spent a lot of time, I thought, talking about earlier myths. A large part of the show was part of that. But as far as the relationship with atheists, I mean, I heard, explain, well, you could say Christians are mythicists about Muslims, but I've heard Richard Dawkins say the same thing about atheists. Everybody who's religious is atheist towards everybody else. So it seems to me a mythicist means you have knowledge and education regarding how current religions tie to earlier myths, but it seems to me it still falls under that modern definition of atheist, which is simply a lack of belief in God.
Right.
It just sounds like, because atheist by itself really doesn't say a lot.
Well, to Fritz's point, though, that's one of the things that mythicism doesn't take you to God. You'll never be able to argue away God. But what
deism, right?
It takes you to the mythological stories like Jesus or Muhammad or Moses, and it shows kind of where what we have written down, where those come from. But atheists will see value in mythicism, but there are also atheists that don't find any value in mythicism and actually call it a crockpot pseudoscience. So it's kind of in that weird range, like we feel that it definitely ties into atheism. I think Rob can talk to that.
Oh, absolutely it does. It's more weapons in the arsenal.
Right.
It's more weapons in the arsenal, but again, myself, as a scientist, by training, I can't know everything for certainty. There's always a little bit of room for doubt. Now, do I have my common sense? Well, of course I do. I would say common sense tells me that the figure that is described in the Bible or in the Quran isn't the figure that created us, but is there something out there that, something, I don't know what it is, some energy, is it physics? Maybe physics and mathematics. Maybe that's what created everything. I mean, I don't know. In the end, we can't go to the beginning of everything. So
Yeah, and
I just, because I can't be certain. I mean, to me, I think sometimes I will compare atheists who say, I know for sure that there isn't a God, almost along the similar parallel and wavelength as a Christian that says, I know for a fact that there is a God. And it's like, okay, well, my existence alone is enough for me to say, hey, something happened. I don't know. So, I won't say for sure.
Well, when Thomas Huxley created the term agnostic, he called atheist Gnostic anti-theist. And I think it is the old school definition of atheist, where it was more that dogmatic stance. There absolutely is no God. I think the modern definition now is this lack of belief, so it's less dogmatic. But a lot of people have misunderstandings about agnosticism, where they think, oh, that means you're not sure whether or not there's fairies. But Thomas Huxley didn't believe in any superstition. He said he believed that scientific criticism would prove destructive to all supernaturalism and religion. The only thing he was agnostic about was some kind of higher intelligence that might be currently beyond our perceptions and philosophies. And if that's the case, how can you say for certain that there's something like that, some kind of higher intelligence that we can't perceive that doesn't exist?
The conversation that we're really having right now is exactly why we don't focus on the existence or non-existence of God, because this conversation can go on forever with a philosophical conjecture by many different types of people, their beliefs and Confucianism and whatever you want to throw in. With mythicism, I mean, we're focusing just on the stories, what's being said about people. Did he really walk on water? Well, there's no evidence, written or anything, that Jesus walked on water outside of the Bible, nor is there any evidence that dead people walked through Jerusalem. I mean, I always like to think that, if you had a whole bunch of thousands of dead people walking through a city, the first thing I would do if I had a home, I'd be like, 10 dead people just stopped by my house on this date,
Right.
And you would see that all over the town and on every single coin, created after that, as like the most amazing day to ever exist in human experience, and none of that exists. So, it's, again, the idea of us using common sense, I mean, that's what we used to have. Before we saw things like the zeitgeist, where we felt we got educated on other religious beliefs, and pre-Christian religious beliefs, for us it was just common sense, logic, for why Jesus, wasn't really powerful. I mean, for me it was like, well, it's possible maybe he walked around on earth, but he definitely didn't fly to heaven and do this, because my common sense told me he did it. Well, now that I'm seeing that there's many gods that did many of the things Jesus did, now I'm like saying, okay, well, here's the evidence that Jesus ain't anything special. Probably ain't real, because here's the connection to astrotheology and,
and no historians writing about him.
And any good scientist is going to examine the prevailing theories. So you've got to examine theism, and then you come up with a cause for theism. And in the fact that there's so many sides, so many myths, and they accrete and subtly change over the ages, really makes sense. Okay, that explains theism. It doesn't explain deism, but it does, it's a good rebut against theism.
Well, I've definitely learned a lot from you guys, and a lot from watching the Richard Carrier videos that you guys have shared, and a lot of things that I didn't know about the mythical origins of Christianity, and even that the apostles themselves weren't written about, and looks like they were invented until much later as well. So I'm definitely learning a lot, being on your Facebook page and being involved with some of the interviews that you've had on as well. Need to wrap this up in a couple minutes. So how does 2015 look like for Mythicist Milwaukee?
Well, I I think right now it's really exciting. We have our Myth Information Conference coming up, and this is a partnered event as well with Swift, which Rob Moore is the president, current co-president of, and Craft, which Rob Moore is the current president of. That's the Southeast Wisconsin Freethinkers and the Kenosha Racine area Freethinkers. So we're actually, now that Rob is in a leadership position, we're actually really excited about our future prospects and our future projects and our future ideas that are going to be coming out of this partnership. And we hope with this event that we can start challenging the local community, because we've been so focused on our social media and the social community, which starts to be like an international community. I'd say like 10% of the people that like our pages are actually from Milwaukee. We're actually starting to try to build this thing up. And I don't know, Rob, if you want to talk to some of that.
Well, as far as building the coalition going forward?
Yes.
2015 is going to be an amazing year for atheism and mythicism in Milwaukee. The groups grow every week. The Mythicist team itself is 4 times as big as, at least, as when a year ago. And that's, we're talking about, going from 2 people to a hard-working group of 8 or 10. On the other side of it, Swift is over 500 members strong now, and it's starting to seed smaller groups around it. So what we're seeing is a grassroots uprising, really, of local groups, which will then center around the bigger groups in Milwaukee, which are also affiliated with national groups. So hopefully we're seeing a national coalition of non-believers being formed, and as Sean stated, Milwaukee it may as well be the Bible Belt in terms of a black hole of secularism. We're kicking the door open where there was not any light before, so we're really excited about it.
Okay, very cool.
Milwaukee is ranked, at least last year, when I looked at one of my rankings, that it was considered the 17th most religious city in America. So, I mean, that's significant. So for us, this is also a test to see, not only a test of our ability to market, our event, but really it's a test of, what is the local community of Milwaukee really like? Are they go-getters? Are they willing to do this? Are they willing to take a chance on this? Are they curious enough to even see what we are and what we do? Are they interested in showing up to an event where, again, Rob likes to speak a lot, and it's very true to the point of, individuals, quote unquote, coming out as, if not full-blown atheists, to just the fact of questioning their family's belief systems, and, is the Milwaukee community going to show up?
Yep.
Right, right. And I think, the event is going to be a good way to gauge that. And the other thing we're trying to help with that is the podcast, our weekly podcast that we have every week. We're trying to partner with national known people such as like Lawrence Krauss or Emmett Mesa or Seth Andrews. The people that have kind of been doing this a while. We're trying to, learn from them as well as partner with them so we can make this thing as big as possible. And Rob and Brian, if you guys haven't checked out the show, the Mythicist Milwaukee show, Google that. Rob and Brian do such a fantastic job of staying on par with these guests, and it's just been, it's been an amazing experience. I never thought I'd be producing a show, bringing these types of names onto the show. It's just been fun all around, but it's also educational, and I think, we're trying to hit it on all years. We're trying to figure out what the best practices are for MM and for Swift and Craft for us to get this message out there,
Well,
and that to get people to actually respond.
Very cool.
One big, what's really nice for us now is that we can now run our own podcast. Really the 4 of us, we can run on our own merit now, because when we initially started the radio shows as producers, we were producing it through WRJN, which is an APC Network news affiliate. So using that as a platform, we were able to attract names such as Lawrence Krauss, Dr. Lawrence Krauss, and other big names, Annie Laurie Gaylor in the community, David Silverman, David Fitzgerald, etc. So now that we have, we're now doing our own independent podcast and radio program. We can utilize these past guests as an incentive for other guests to say, hey, these big names have gone on the show. Let me try this out.
Yep.
They'd be more inclined to do it than if we were to just say, we're going to do a podcast now. You've never heard of us, but join us for a conversation. We have the platform of having that AM radio station, which also WRJN is Wisconsin's oldest radio station, oldest running radio station, and so now we can do it on our own. And we're still looking for other big names. We have a lot of fish that we still need to look for.
Yeah.
For Richard Dawkins, for example, is somebody that comes to mind.
Yeah, but I'm sure he's got a busy schedule.
For the prospects of the team that we have here.
Well, very very cool. Love the work.
For those listening out there that are smaller groups or people that want to get involved, we want to partner with them. So we want to partner with anybody that's willing to come out and kind of spend the energy and time into this. As Rob always alludes to, the movement. It is a movement. It's a grassroots movement right now, and we need as many able-bodied people out there that are interested to come and help support us, even if it's helping us hang up flyers or getting the word out through their circles of friends. You really need to promote this thing, and we're looking for that. And again, we're trying to challenge the Milwaukee community to finally raise this black hole of secularism that exists.
Well, very very cool, guys. Great talking to you. Love the work you're doing. You guys are active warriors in a battle of reason over superstition. And absolutely looking forward to Myth Information on April 25th. It's going to be awesome.
And James, you're going to be there as well.
Yep. Yep.
Don't forget the day.
I'm putting the presentation together. It's going to rock.
We're excited to have you.
Thanks, Jim.
Awesome.
Thank you so much again. I'm so excited to have you.
All right. Thanks a lot, everybody.